All right, I'd like to welcome everybody to the cybersecurity brown bag session. Today we have Reuben Ajayi, and he is going to provide a interesting insight, especially for international students who are working on OPT or CPT and trying to plan out their career here in the United States, whether they're coming from Nigeria, India, Pakistan, India, or somewhere else outside the United States. So first, I want to ask Reuben, can you please provide us your background?
Sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity to give out this information. As I totally understand um, some of the hurdles that a lot of international students usually have to go through. Well, to start, I am Reuben Ajayi. I hail from Nigeria, Lagos, Nigeria, and I came to the United States to study computer information systems for my bachelor's degree, and I eventually went for my master's in computer science at Louisiana State University. So I did my bachelor's and master's at Louisiana State University in Shreveport. So they've got a campus in Shreveport, Louisiana. Um, from there, I gained some significant amount of experience as a developer. I worked at a lab called Laboratory for Advanced Biomedical Informatics on the campus of LSU, LSUS. And what we did was pretty much just analyze big data for medical doctors, and that was where I pretty much kick-started my career. So I gained a lot of experience doing that. The lab was ran by uh, a couple who happened to be professors at the school. So they gave me the opportunity to work there, where I gained a lot of programming experience. And after my master's degree, I got a full-time position as a full stack software engineer at Automatic Payroll Systems. And yeah, and I just kept going forward from there as a software engineer. So all I do is program. I am a full stack software engineer currently.
Okay, Reuben, thanks for that lovely introduction. So, what are the key challenges faced by international students when completing their degree in a foreign country, and how can they overcome these challenges?
I think one of the main issues is uh, getting a job for a lot of international students. Although I understand the financial requirements by the American government, in this case, the American government, um, because one of the requirements to get a US student visa is to be able to um, is for the students to be financially um, to where they don't really have to rely on a job on campus. But life happens, and as full-time students, we tend to at some point need some form of financial help, which is typical in the international students community. So one of the major issues for a lot of international students, from my experience and from having a lot of friends who are also foreigners in the United States, is getting a job. Um, According to not just the laws but also policies in a lot of universities, uh, um, um, the schools the schools have to prioritize American citizens, over international students. Understandably, right? But so sometimes this really is a big challenge for international students who might be desperately in need of a a job on campus. And one of the reasons also that this is a problem is international students are not allowed to work off campus, especially if whatever job they try to get off campus has nothing to do with the university they're currently attending. You can work off campus if, again, please don't take this as legal advice, but I'm just speaking from experience as a former international student here. But what we realized is international students are actually allowed to work off campus as long as the business or the company they're working for is directly affiliated with the school. So sometimes, they've got these tricky laws that even officers on campus don't really understand. From my experience, on campus, even going to talk to HR, they still prevented me from working for a company that was affiliated with the school. And legally speaking, I was actually allowed to do that. That's what I realized talking to immigration lawyers. So getting a job is very important for a lot of international students, and unfortunately, this is one of the challenges that they face. But one of the ways that to overcome this hurdle is really to network, ask questions, talk to immigration lawyers. There's a lot of online resources where you could actually pay as little as $5 or $15, at least at the time when I was in college. I paid maybe $5, $10 to talk to a couple of immigration lawyers for the first consultation online, and I realized the answers were very consistent. And also doing my research personally, I realized that, oh yeah, I was allowed to work off campus as long as they are directly affiliated with the school or somehow affiliated, as long as they're providing services also to students from that school. You're allowed to pretty much work for them. But that's just an example of many other issues that international students face, if that helps.
Oh, it does. So another question: how can international students effectively balance the demands of their academic studies with gaining practical work experience through internships during their time in college? So how do you balance that?
Interesting. Okay, so of course it's important to note that international students first need to understand that, and it's funny because it's interesting because my advisor at that time in college used to tell me something. He used to say, hey, always remember you are a full-time student, right? You are full-time. You shouldn't really worry about other things outside school, right? But the reality is, at some point, especially for international students, you need to find ways to gain practical experiences, right? And thankfully, the CPT, Curricular Practical Training, and OPT, Optional Practical Training programs open up these opportunities to actually learn something while you're also schooling, right? But in order to be able to balance these, what I would recommend is ensuring that you are not doing anything outside your study. Now, getting a job that has to do with what you're studying in school, of course, is also still part of your studies. And what tends to happen is a lot of students, would end up getting not even just international students, right? A lot of students tend to get waiting jobs or trying to do something on the side while they go to school. Understandably, since we all have our own different financial backgrounds, and family people have their responsibilities. understandably, but for international students, it's slightly different because sometimes, from my experience, I've seen international students tend to almost forget that they are here to study, and maybe tend to try to do other things outside school, maybe to get money, to get paid on their table. It happens sometimes, and a lot of us know about this, right? But you need to pretty much just focus on what you are studying and what you're learning outside school that has to do with your education. So, for instance, as a computer science student, um, if I had gotten an internship attached to my CPT while I was actually studying, um, I should just focus on that program, and since it's attached to what I'm learning at school, it's a perfect quote unquote is a perfect distraction, quote unquote. It's not a distraction, but I'm putting that in quotes, since it's something you're doing outside school, but still a part of your studies, and just not do anything outside that. Now, if when I was in school, well, I'm still a musician, so I play the drums, I play the piano, and when I was in school, I played for a praise team. I played for a praise team in Shreveport, Louisiana. So I had practice where I had to go practice with the band. I wasn't getting paid, by the way, but I was doing this for the love of music, and this was also in church, since I'm a Christian. Um, but I tried my best to not let that distract me from what I was doing on campus. So if I had gotten an internship, I will prioritize that internship because it is so much important, especially since it's also tied to my immigration status. Because you would not want to get out of status as long as you're focusing on what you're doing. That as long as you're focusing on your CPT and also focusing on schoolwork, you should be good by the time you graduate. So I don't know if that answers the question. But again, just giving out my own
Well,
personal experience.
Ruben, the mention of CPT brings up a number of things.
Yeah.
So, so how does optional practical training contribute to the professional development of international students, and then what steps can they take to maximize its benefits?
Oh, absolutely. So it's very important to note the differences between, which I think you actually also asked in the previous question. Sorry, I didn't answer that, but it's important to note the difference between CPT and OPT, right? Like, so CPT, curricular practical training, is um, uh, the international students are only allowed to utilize CPT while they're in school during their study, right, on campus. While OPT can actually be used during their study and also after graduation. Now, a lot of international students tend to use OPT, optional practical training, after their study, especially since it gives you more time to work on what your next plan in terms of immigration is. Um, uh, um, so now CPT and optional practical training at the end of the day tend to they all gear towards the same goal, gain experience. So their international students will usually utilize CPT while they are currently still studying to get a form of internship or a job. I believe there's a 20-hour maximum um, number of hours that which is the maximum number of hours that they can work, I believe. Again, this has been a while. I graduated college in 20, not a while, but in 2015, my bachelor's, and I finished my master's in 2017. But I did not use CPT. I only utilized my OPT, especially since I was already gaining real life experience working at the laboratory for advanced biomedical informatics, right? Um, but a lot of students a lot of international students should utilize CPT to gain experience, real world experience as they are learning. Now, I'm not 100% sure what the differences are in terms of what the differences are um, in the programs, right, on campus. So I'm not sure if it differs, if there's a difference in CPT for computer science students, or if there is if it's different from that of a business student on campus.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, Ruben, quick interjection. So the difference
yeah, sure.
is, I guess you can say the OPT, right? This is once you're done, is
Yeah,
that if you're in a STEM program, you get 3 years, and if you're in a non-STEM program, you get a year.
exactly, exactly. Right. Now that to my knowledge, again, to my limited knowledge, it's that's how it was when I was graduating, from what I remember. But I don't know. I do not know if it's currently if it's been changed. Because these administration they do a lot of tweaks to these immigration policies. Especially during my time, that was when Trump was in power, and there were a lot of changes in the H1Bs and some of the other programs that had to do with immigration laws, which directly or indirectly affected international students. So yeah, OPT. You've got so when I graduated, I utilized my OPT for 1 year. So after a year, you can extend it for, I believe, 2 more years, from what I remember. So that's a total of 3 years. Now, during that time frame, again, I am talking about, and this is for STEM programs, right? I'm not 100% sure how it is for other programs, but I believe they're almost the same. So for me, within those 3 years, I was working with my company to get my H1B work visa. Um, and there, I don't want to jump the gun right now because I'm sure you have other questions that maybe are pertaining to the H1B work visa and others. But those are pretty much the main differences between the CPT and OPT. One, you can use during study, that's the CPT, and optional practical training can be utilized while you're studying and also after you graduate. But students, international students, and I would recommend that international students use their OPT after graduation, because once you use part of it during study, then you shorten the time frame that you have after graduation. And international students have to get a job. You need to get a job within, I believe, 6 months. Otherwise, you're going to be required to go back to your home country. So these are things that you need to consider before you determine to use your OPT during study. Yeah.
Okay, now you mentioned the H1B process, right? So a number of
Yeah.
students, they're always wondering, how can they stay longer in this country, right? They're like, okay, well, I
Yeah.
understand CPT and OPT, because it's like international students jump from one part of the visa process to another.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, how difficult is it to get in the H1B process?
Okay. So um the H1B can only be achieved after using up your optional practical training program. So the process is you come here on an F1 student visa after graduation. By the way, I need to point out something. Um, and this is from personal experience. I ensured that I got job offers before I officially graduated um, during my master's. So I did my master's immediately after bachelor's degree, right? But I ensured I got job offers before graduating. Because again, you do not want to waste time as international students. Your time is very limited. That you have a certain number of months to look for a job, get the job, and immediately you get the job, your time keeps the time keeps counting down. So once you get your job, it's important to note, maybe during an interview or once you get a job offered, I recommend during an interview with the company, it's important to note that you need to mention to them that you will need sponsorship. You will need H1B work sponsorship. So not all companies offer to help with this. So there's a lot of companies out there that will outright deny. If you apply and part of the application process is them asking you, do you need sponsorship, right? And a lot of them are going to deny you just because you need sponsorship. And you've got a few companies out there who are willing to sponsor you, because the process itself could be tedious for these companies, especially if it's a maybe small size, mid-size companies. But the H1B process is very well structured. So you can only achieve it after you've used up your OPT. So once you've done with your OPT, if your company had agreed to file for your H1B work visa, then before your optional practical training expires, the company would have started working on getting your H1B work visa. So again, the key point is talk to your company, whatever company is hiring you, wherever you're getting employed, ensure they know that you need sponsorship, and they will inform you immediately if they will be able to sponsor your H1B work visa. Otherwise, then look for someone who will be willing to sponsor your H1B work visa. And the process, once they start, as long as every paperwork is legit, it usually goes well. And once you get your H1B, you could then start working up your way up to getting your permanent residency. Now note that it's not guaranteed that you will get an H1B work visa, right? Because it's like a raffle draw. It's sort of like a raffle draw game, I guess. And the number of H1B visas that are issued out every year is capped. So there is a cap to it. So it's very important to start the process early, in order for your employer to have enough time to begin that process as early as possible.
Okay, I have another item, or you could say another concern that comes up. So when, as an international student, when you're applying for jobs, do you need to state that you're from a certain country, or you need to be sponsored? Is that something that you state on your resume when you're looking for a job, or do you bring it up in an interview?
Absolutely not. You do not need to. You do not need to what's it called, to tell an employer you're from Nigeria or you're from India, excuse me, or you're from whatever your nationality is. It's not required, and I believe it might even also be against the law. I might be wrong. But I believe that's illegal. But you do not need to specify or state where you're from. It is only important to inform the employer or potential employer that you will need sponsorship, and ask if they would sponsor. Now, there are companies, uh, depending on what you have to offer as an employee, there are companies who haven't done it before and might decide to actually do it for you, as a first. So that happens. And that also was my experience with automatic payroll systems. Before before some of the requirements for H1B changed. My company, Automatic Payroll Systems at that time, had not done, they had not filed for H1B work visa for anyone. But they ended up just filing for me, and I was the first person they were doing it for. Unfortunately, that didn't go as planned because a lot of the Trump administration at the time changed a lot of the requirements, so they couldn't fulfill it. So I just had to find a different company who would sponsor that. Um, so yeah.
Okay. And then at your university back in Louisiana,
Yeah.
so how was the I guess the international office, career services, did they provide you what was needed, or did you have to go above and beyond what they could provide?
Um, that's a good question. I believe the career services, to be honest, they couldn't really answer all the questions I had. They could not, they couldn't help that much because they weren't equipped with a lot of the information regarding um, the um, immigration process for international students, and that's why a lot of universities have international students department, right? Because the career services is just a part of the university that actually just caters to all the students. Um, but thankfully, at some point, LSUS ended up having an international students department that was obviously from its name dedicated to international students. And that also included giving out necessary information, immigration information to international students. Now, that was very helpful compared to career services. Career services only helped, from my experience, to structure out my resume. Um, so as expected. Um, but the international students department was able to guide me um, based on other international students' experiences and based on immigration laws. They were also able to refer you to immigration lawyers if you needed one. It was the department, international students departments are typically very, very well equipped with the right amount of information to give international students guidance to getting a job, to starting as an F1 student, understanding the visa processes, understanding what you need to do in order to, and some of this in order to achieve, get to that, maybe the H1B level, right? And I say that because international, these universities have to keep track of your progress after graduation. So the international student services or whomever, whoever is in charge of your admission at the international student services department needs to keep reporting to immigration your status as an international, as a student on F1 visa, and as a graduate who's now currently in the optional practical training program. Because remember, under OPT, legally, you're still a student. You're still an international student. You don't have your visa status hasn't changed. You're still on F1. You're still considered an F1 student visa carrier. So those 3 years you have to work to figure stuff out, you're in the optional practical training. So you still have access to information at your university. You can still go back to your university to get help. You can still go back to your university if you have immigration questions. So far they're keeping track of your status. You still have the opportunity to get whatever questions answered that you may have. So that is the cool thing about having an international students department, just catering to international students in these universities. So it's important to utilize that. I saw a lot of international students not really. I also worked at the International Student Services Center at LSUS at some point. And I saw that not all the international students, used these opportunities that were provided by the department. And it is important you do, and not just try to figure stuff out yourself, because it could come back and bite you. But eventually, you can't make mistakes with the law, right? They say ignorance of the law is not an excuse. Especially since international students could easily fall out of status. So it's important to keep track of immigration laws. It's important to keep track of what's needed in order for you to stay in status as an international student.
Now, you said if you fall out of status, what happens, Reuben, if you fall out of status?
Yeah, so if you fall out of status as an international student who is on an F1 visa, who is on an F1 student visa, that means you are current now illegally being in the United States. So you are required by law to immediately vacate the states and go back to your home country. Because again, the student visa, the F1 student visa is what is keeping you legal in the country. And there are requirements that need to keep getting satisfied in order for you to stay in status, right? In order for you to keep being legal in the country, So once you violate any of those rules and regulations surrounding F1 student visa, you are considered to be out of status, and you need to leave the country immediately. The moment you do that, the moment you violate that, and it's known, you would be required to leave the country. If immigration knows, you can get deported. And that gets worse, right? Because now you will have a ban. Typically, that's what they do. Typically, they put a ban on your passport, and I think sometimes a year, up to maybe 10 years, I believe, depending on what law you've violated. These things are very tricky, right? Falling out of status just means that you need to leave the country and go back to your home country as quickly as possible.
Wow, those are some serious consequences for falling out of status.
Yes, yes,
So,
yes. Also, it's important, by the way. It's important, by the way, to also understand that falling out of status. Some of the things that trigger the out of status violation could be you working, for instance, you working off campus, you working for a company that is not affiliated with the school. Once that's known, immediately that's done and you're getting paid, then you're violating, you're now out of status. Of course, no one's gonna know. Yeah, sure, you're right. If you are on academic probation, for instance, as well, you're now out of status because you're in the United States for school. So once you are on academic probation, that means you're not taking the number of hours required to be a full-time student. And once that is not in place, then you're required to leave the country immediately. So it's important to just note that there are different elements to you falling out of status.
and I noticed you're on LinkedIn and some other sites. Like, how important is it to network? And then how early should you network?
Very good question. I'll give my experience as an example. Um, so before I started my master's, I started tutoring. I started tutoring. Um, my first again, maybe it's important for me to even say this. My first couple of years in college was oh, it was terrible. You know, there was this language barrier. Mind you, I speak English. English is my official language, not my mother tongue, but my official language in Nigeria, right? But when I came here, things were totally different. I had this culture shock. I also partied. To be honest, I partied, and my best grade from the first couple of years was a D, maybe. you know, um, and until I had this epiphany that made me realize that I'm just wasting time, I'm just wasting money, and I was on academic probation one semester. Now, at the moment, thankfully, I believe it was summer. It was during the summer, so I was not required to leave the country. Um, Mind you, the university is keeping track of this, right? So if you are required to leave the country and you're not out of the country, the school is obligated to report to immigration. And you and I know the school will do it. But at this time, because it was during the summer, I was not required to leave the country. I just couldn't take summer classes, right? So that I believe it was the first few months of my third year. I started learning programming myself. I started learning everything from scratch, everything I was supposed to have learned the first 2 years. I sold my TV. I was working at a computer lab at this time when I started teaching myself programming, until I caught up in my computer science classes. And from I didn't stop from there, right? I started building projects. I started building a portfolio from the time that I started teaching myself. So the goal was to build a portfolio. From there, I started tutoring. So I started meeting up with students, teaching them programming. I was presenting in classes, ensuring that professors were noticing me. By the time I finished my bachelor's, I got a call from um, Dr. Trushel and Dr. Sivek. These are the professors in charge of the Laboratory for Advanced Biomedical Informatics on the campus of LSUS. So they actually encouraged me to come in to do my master's because they had paid attention to my work right from a bachelor's, and offered the graduate. I believe it's called graduate studies work. I'm sorry, I don't really remember the terms used back then. But I ended up seizing the opportunity, based on the relationship I had built with these professors who were also in charge of this lab. So I got in, and they paid my tuition for my master's degree, right? From there, from meeting up with these medical doctors, and to building a portfolio for myself, I ended up building real world applications as a programmer. Um, and while doing that, I was also building relationships with other professors in the master's program. And before you knew it, I ended up building a real world application with a couple of students that we had to present as a final presentation for our master's degree. And LSUS did something where they brought in local companies to watch our presentations, right? So due to these opportunities that I had seized from the beginning, right? And I said beginning from during my master's, um, I was opportune to actually meet a couple of people from a couple of companies there in Shreveport, and they liked the presentation. They offered me interviews. I wrote my resume. And while during the presentation, right after the presentation, while I was having conversations with these companies, I noticed something. The professors that I had built relationships with would come and interject, and they will interrupt the conversations I'm having with these guys, just to sell me, right? Just to ensure that these guys understand my value, the value I could bring into their companies. They talk so well about me. And this happened because of the relationship I built with them. So it was a moment for me, um, to realize that building relationships on campus, especially as international students, again, going back to timing, you don't have the luxury to not do the right thing at the right time, right? You, as international students, you need to build relationships to escalate, to escalate your progress. Get to know your professors, let the professors understand your competence level, let them understand how good you are as an international student, because you never know where that could you never know what doors that could really open for you. So networking is very important. Open LinkedIn accounts. uh, Post your projects, your side gigs, side projects, you're working at home, whatever it is, post it up there. Connect with professors on campus, on LinkedIn, and other professional uh, social platforms out there. But most importantly, build a relationship with your professors on campus. Let your professors know you. It could really come back. It could be good karma, you know. Just building relationships with them. But yeah, I don't know what else to say, Dawson.
I appreciate this a ton. So our last question is, when students are trying to get jobs, like should they use dice, recruiters? How does that work? Right. So now they've done all the stuff, they're putting their resume or CV out on the web. How do they land a gig using
Mm,
one of these job sites? And
yeah.
how's the process when the recruiter calls and stuff like that?
Okay. From experience, I noticed something. Um, a, a lot of people tend to not understand how to, especially if you're new in the job on the job market, right? So you're fresh out of college, individual, and you are now on the hunt. You're looking for a job. You've done everything you could and could not get a job before you graduated. That's totally fine. That's okay. That's normal. Um, but it's important to start to understand that you would need to start building yourself profiles on these websites, on these platforms, Dice, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, and all these other platforms out there. Build yourself a profile. Make it consistent. Make it consistent. Post updated resumes on there. Whatever you have in your portfolio, add it. It never hurts. The more the merrier. It's never too much information, right? Because you're not sending your resume to the company yet. You're posting it up there for recruiters to contact you. Um, you know, um, uh, and it's important to understand these, especially and I'm saying for international students, because a lot of international students, unfortunately, tend to not have access to these information. Um, but know the difference between going to a company, right? Or knowing someone that works for a company and giving them your resume. versus a recruiter contacting you for a position, and understand that there are also differences in the types of recruiters calling you. So what I realized um, from my professional career is there are consultants, these consulting companies out there, right? I was ignorant, totally ignorant of these companies. What they do is they work with big companies. We're talking the Facebooks, um, Bristol Myers Squibb, the pharmaceutical company, maybe the big five. Let me just put it that way. So they work for all these big companies, and these recruiters will hire you, and they will be what's called a vendor to these clients. So their clients would be these big names out there. And but I've seen international students not understand that process and not understand that these jobs, these recruiters that call them, actually typically will offer H1B visas. I've heard international students say, these guys are scammers. Oh, this guy's oh, this guy sounds a certain way. And I just automatically think that he's a scammer or she's a scammer. But international students need to understand that you don't need to go work for a well-known company. You don't need to submit your resume only to a well-known company. There are recruitment companies out there that you have never heard of who work with all these top companies out there. And they usually would get your information from ZipRecruiter, from Dice, all these resume platforms out there, or recruiting platforms out there, where they get your information and then they contact you. And sometimes they would even talk about an offer immediately on the phone. So it's important to note these things and not just automatically flag them as maybe scams or I'm not just sure of this. And I'm speaking from experience. That was initially what I was thinking as well. I was like, oh, this is strange. I'm looking for a job that's going to do my H1B now at this point. So let me find someone who works for a particular company and maybe give them my resume. But somehow I was able to trust that these recruiters were actually legit after doing my research, and I gave them my resume, and they immediately set up an interview with a client. In this case, City. I worked for a City Group in the past, and I did an interview over the phone, and in a few weeks I got the job. Um, so it's very important. I've spoken with international students that did not understand this process, that did not understand that these recruiters are out there looking for you. So it happens. Again, get in touch with recruiters through Dice, through ZipRecruiters, answer your phone calls, open accounts on your LinkedIn account, open whatever professional platforms out there. Network, network, network.
All right. With that said, Reuben, I just really want to close this out and thank you for your time, especially, late, almost 10 o'clock on a Sunday evening. I really want to thank you. And I know that the students will really enjoy this particular brown bag session because a lot of them are, they're international students and they're in the process of finding a job and navigating this CPT OPT ordeal, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do and how to plan out the next couple of years here in this country. So again, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Dawson. I really love giving out this information, and I totally understand how important it is for international students. So I am glad to be back anytime, any day. Thank you, Dawson.
All right. Cheers.